Operation Iron 2.
When it comes to bodybuilding, the ultimate results that you can obtain are largely determined by your genetic capacity. In other words, to put it in simple terms, not everybody can be Mr. Olympia. You have to have certain genetics, certain qualities. I discussed this in a previous video concerning bodybuilding genetics. Please refer to that video for all the factors that comprise, let's say, beneficial or optimal bodybuilding genetics. I explained it all in that video. In this particular video, but before I get to the subject of this video, I just want to point out that although genetics determine the ultimate results you can obtain from any bodybuilding program, the truth is no matter what level of genetics you have, bad, good, or whatever, if you train properly and you adhere to the proven, established principles of progressive resistance exercise that underlies the muscle hypertrophy process, anybody, I don't care who you are, can make near spectacular progress if they engage regularly in a properly structured weight training program. I just want to point that out, and it doesn't take steroids to do that. That's a major mistake. The notion that you cannot get a muscular, very impressive physique unless you use steroids is pure garbage. Again, some people will respond better than others to weight training and nutrition, but everybody can improve. When I competed in bodybuilding years ago, I never touched a steroid, and I actually developed a fairly good physique. I wouldn't say I was a world-class pro physique because I didn't take steroids, but I managed to go from a very mediocre body to a level where I won about 15 to 20 bodybuilding contests without taking any drugs. And again, I didn't have exceptional genetics in any way, shape, or form. All I did is train hard, and I followed good nutritional principles back then of what was established in the way of nutrition. There wasn't as much information back then as there is today. Today, I probably would have gone a little bit further because of the science that has developed in the ensuing years between, the nearly 40 years ago when I competed and today. But today I want to discuss the top 5 reasons why you aren't making gains. In other words, if you're involved in either a recreational weight training program or a bodybuilding program, whatever your goals, some people just seem to be stymied. They don't make any gains. And I thought about this, and I kind of wrote on this little piece of paper what I think is the top 5 reasons. And there's many reasons, but I'm going to list what I consider the top 5 reasons why people don't make regular gains. From what I've observed in my nearly 55 years of training and study, these are the 5 top reasons. The first reason, the first reason why people don't make gains, regular gains, is overtraining. A lot of people do too many sets, train too often, and this particular aspect has been accentuated in recent years with the advent of the internet, because I can't help laughing. I go on these bodybuilding sites, and some of these forums, I very rarely look at them, but when I do, it kind of, you know that expression, LOL, laughing out loud. Well, that's the way I am when I read this stuff, because it's so nonsensical, the recommendations. I mean, I've seen videos on YouTube, and I've seen websites where they make statements like there's no such thing as overtraining. In other words, they seem to think you could do any amount of exercise and make gains. Unfortunately, that's not the way the body works. It's so silly that it's almost, I hate to use the politically incorrect word retarded, but that's the only word I could think of, how stupid that is. There's always a limit how much training your body can recuperate from. And yes, it does vary with individuals. Some people can, for example, training volume. Some people can't do more than, let's say, 6-7 sets a muscle group. Other people can do up to 15 sets and make gains. Generally speaking, if you use anabolic drugs like anabolic steroids and growth hormone, you can tolerate a lot more exercise, because these drugs do increase recovery ability, and they allow your muscles to basically rebuild a lot faster than if you just relied on normal nutrition and that type of thing. But you know, definitely overtraining. This is something that you have to kind of experiment with. I mean, when you're a beginner, you want to keep the volume low, maybe 1 or 2 sets per exercise for about 2, 3 months, and then you could gradually increase it. I have to tell you that the scientific studies that have looked at this particular aspect of training volume have found that 4 to 8 sets is the maximum amount that really will push muscle hypertrophy or muscle growth. Any more than that, you're burning calories, but you're not really building much muscle. So, you know, if you do like, you know, an exercise where you're doing, let's say, 15 sets, 20 sets of one exercise, after the first 8 sets or so, you're just wasting your time. And most people probably can, if they train really intensely, can get by with with much fewer sets, as little as 3 or 4 sets. These days, when I competed in bodybuilding, admittedly, I did 15 to 20 sets per muscle group twice a week. That was the style in those days. It was a split over a 6-day period, each muscle twice a week, and I did do 15 to 20 sets. Looking back in retrospect, I probably would have made the same exact gains if I did only 8 to 10 sets. I believe a lot of my sets are wasted because after the first couple of, let's say after the first 2 or 3 sets, whether you know it or not, the intensity level that you're putting into the exercise drops precipitously. You're not training as hard on the 4th or 5th set as you are on the first 3 sets, and that basically applies to everybody. You might think you are, but you're not. Muscle glycogen drops after 3 sets of a bicep exercise. The muscle glycogen content of your bicep can drop about 25 to 30%. Muscle glycogen is what fuels muscle contraction when you're working out with weights. Obviously, if the energy stores are down after the 3rd set, by the time you get to the 5th set, it's like trying to run a high performance car on no gas. It's just not going to happen. I don't care how much enthusiasm you have. Okay, so again, you're going to have to experiment and figure out the training volume that produces the best gains. You can vary it. I mean, one workout you might want to do 2, 3 sets per exercise, then you could do 5 sets the next, 4 sets. Now you can vary it. Just don't overtrain. If you're not making regular gains, there's a good chance that you're overtraining. There is a limit to how many gains you can make, and again, that's determined by genetics. But if you train properly, you should be able to make regular gains. Oh, the second aspect, or the second reason why I think a lot of people don't make regular gains when they work out, is because they don't employ the very basic principle of progressive resistance training. What is progressive resistance training? Progressive resistance training states that you must increase the resistance in some way, shape, or form every time you work out. In other words, if you can't, if you set a goal rep, let's say you're doing curls again, and you set a goal rep of 12 reps. When you reach those 12 reps, the next workout, you should add a little bit of weight. As little as 2.5 pounds would be enough. But you want to add weight. This is the only way, because the body always tries to maintain homeostasis, including the muscles. In other words, you have to prod the muscles into growth. If you use the same weights all the time, there's no reason for your muscles to respond. You could keep them in shape, but you're not going to make any gains. Actors that I know who don't want to be too big because, the movies and TV, they don't want to have really big guys. They want muscular guys, but not big guys. These guys always use the same weights. They use light weights. They never try and increase the weight, and they stay in shape, but they never make any size gains at all, simply because they don't want to. But if you want to make size gains, you have to add weight. If you can't add weight, you have 2 other options. Your option is to increase the number of reps. If you did 8 reps one workout, your next workout, your goal should be 9 reps. The next workout after that, it should be 10 reps. If you really put your mind to it, you should be able to do it. If you can't make those goal reps, that's a good sign that you're overtraining. You're doing too many sets, because you should be able to make those goal reps every workout. Another way to increase progressive resistance is to cut the rest time between sets. Now, this has to be explained a little bit, because recent scientific studies show to maximize muscle growth, you actually need to rest about 2 to 3 minutes between each set. Personally, I get very bored if I rest 2 to 3 minutes between each set. So I actually, in my training, I only rest about, believe it or not, 30 to a maximum of 60 seconds, 1 minute. I never rest more than that, because if I train If I rest too long, I find myself getting very bored and I lose interest in training. Again, I'm not really trying to be big anymore, but if you are, you might want to consider the 3-minute rest. If you're training for strength, if you want to increase your strength, you want to rest at least 3 to 4 minutes between sets. But in other words, cutting the rest time down, training faster is also a form of progressive resistance. If you don't employ progressive resistance, you are simply not going to make gains. I know somebody might say, well, what if you take a lot of anabolic drugs? Well, it'll look like you're making gains, but actually a lot of it'll be water bloat because you're not really building any muscle unless you employ progressive resistance. It's known as the overload principle. You have to overload the muscles in order to prod them to growth. This is a basic scientific rule of weight training. It's been known for about 75 years. There's no getting around it. Next reason why another reason, a third reason why you're not making muscle gains is very bad workout tempo. And this again is something I've seen more in recent times. I go to a gym. I train at Gold's Gym in Venice mainly, but I also have an alternate gym. It's a 24-hour fitness. And I know this sounds like an exaggeration, but when I go to the 24-hour fitness gym, 99% of the people in that gym, now none of them are bodybuilders, but that's besides the point. The point is they bring their cell phones in the gym with them, and they fiddle around with their cell phones, and they do a set about every 20 minutes. And these people make no physical changes at all. I've been going to this gym long enough to see these people make no gains, no fat loss, no muscle gains, nothing. They get the same benefit from staying home and watching TV. They're totally wasting their times. And I'll make a flat statement. Unless you are expecting an emergency situation, like let's say you're married and your wife is ready to give birth at every moment or any minute or something like that, there is no rational reason to bring a cell phone in the gym. Unless you're the president of I was going to say the president of the United States, but that no longer applies. But unless you're really expecting an important call, there's no rational reason to bring a cell phone in the gym. If you do, you're not a serious trainer. You're hitting the head against the wall. Stay home. Unless wait, there's one exception. If you have the cell phone or one of those devices where you're listening to music, where you want to put the earplugs in, that's fine. But if you're fiddling around on Facebook or fooling around on the cell phone and doing one set every 20 minutes, forget it. You're not going to make any gains. Stay home. Related to workout, bad tempo is also another very, very common error, is no eccentric contraction focus. In other words, most of these people in Gold's and other gyms, they lift weights. They'll do a curl like this. They'll lift it up and then just drop the weight down. Now, that lowering of the weight is known as negative or eccentric contractions. This is an important point. Listen carefully. About 90% of your muscle growth comes from the negative or eccentric contraction, the lowering of the weight. It's the most important part of a rep is the lowering of the weight. If you'll just let the weight drop, you're not going to make any strength gains and you're not going to make any muscle gains, no matter what anyone tells you. Conversely, if you do take about 4 seconds to lower the weight in any exercise, your muscle gains, and you haven't been doing it before, your muscle gains will increase anywhere from 25 to 50% with no anabolic drug use. So this is the most common mistake. I would say, again, about 95% of people, more than that, about 98% of people I see in the gyms do not put no emphasis on eccentric or negative contractions. The full effects of negative and eccentric contractions are extremely surprising. So much so, I've gathered some research on this, and I'm going to do a full feature on the importance and the effects of eccentric muscle contractions in an upcoming issue of my Applied Metabolics newsletter, and it's contained information that's never been published anywhere that's going to shock you. I'll give you a little hint. If you haven't been doing eccentric muscle contractions and you start doing it, that alone will pull you out of a training plateau where you haven't been making any gains. That's just one aspect. Okay, let's move on to the next reason why you're not making gains. The next reason is not enough. I've talked about this in a recent video. Not enough sleep and rest. In other words, if you're not getting enough sleep, a number of biochemical changes occur in the body. You get insulin insensitive. Your cortisol levels goes up. Your testosterone levels drop. Your growth hormone levels drop. Not getting enough sleep is a major reason. You could be doing everything right, training hard, training intensely, doing eccentric muscle contractions, uh, uh, following good nutritional practices. But if you don't get enough sleep, if you go like 4 or 5 hours sleep, forget it. You're not going to make any gains, and that itself can cause an overtraining type syndrome, where if you wake up in the morning and check your pulse, it'll be higher than normal. That's a sign that you have not fully recovered. So, and you have to also, of course, get enough rest between workouts. I think I've discussed this in recent videos also. Some people respond best to training a muscle only once a week. Others require twice a week. Again, recent studies show for optimal muscle growth, training a muscle twice a week is optimal for most people, but other studies show that training a muscle once a week, they make very good progress. As you get older, you might need even more rest time. Most of the top bodybuilders I know from years ago have greatly reduced their training frequency because they've noticed that they cannot make gains unless they get more rest between workouts. And okay, let's talk about the last reason why, or less common reason why you're not making muscle gains, and that has to do with poor nutrition. In other words, you might not be eating enough food if you're thin, and I also covered this in a recent video. You might not be taking enough protein. A recent study showed for optimal muscle gains for bodybuilders, the amount of protein you want to take in is 2.7 grams per kilogram of body weight. A kilogram is 2.2 pounds. This comes out to just over about a pound of, about a gram of protein per pound of muscle. That's the amount of protein you have to take in to make muscle gains. If you're not taking in that amount of protein, you will not make regular muscle gains. You will be held back. There's also, and then of course there's nutrients. If you're not getting your optimal amount of nutrients, accessory nutrients besides protein, you're not going to make muscle gains. That's why I always suggest that everyone consider using a vitamin mineral, because a lot of bodybuilders follow restricted diets. They don't eat enough fruits or vegetables, and they don't eat a so-called balanced diet. If you don't, you're going to be lacking vitamins and minerals and other nutrients that are required for growth, and you will not make gains. You also have to pay attention to your fat intake. You need a certain amount of saturated and monounsaturated fat to support muscle growth. Your fat intake should equal about 20% of your daily calories. If you're not getting your 20% of your daily calories as fat, meaning again saturated or monounsaturated fat, then you're going to have a deficit in testosterone production, especially if you're not on drugs. That's going to hold back your gains. By the way, monounsaturated fat's an example. It's olive oil and macadamia nuts, that type of thing. That's what monounsaturated fats are. So that about covers it. Those are the reasons, the 5 main reasons why you aren't making gains. And if you correct let's say the deficiencies that I mentioned here, the odds are you will probably start making gains, and this does not involve taking any anabolic drugs at all. I admit that most of what I've told you is common sense, but it's amazing how many people ignore these factors and as a consequence make no gains at all. And by the way, if you want more information on exercise science, nutrition, supplements, ergogenic aids, hormonal therapy, anti-aging research, fat loss techniques, and other subjects, subscribe today to my Applied Metabolics newsletter, www.appliedmetabolics.com. 40 to 50 pages every month, solid evidence-based information, no ads, no commercials, not trying to sell you anything. I'm not associated with any supplement companies. It's like getting a monthly ebook every month, very easy to understand, and you will learn a lot. As I said in other videos, within a couple of months after reading my Applied Metabolics newsletter, you yourself will be an expert. All your questions will be answered. I'm including not only the current research that is not appearing anywhere else on the internet, such as blogs and so-called, whatever, science sites and all that stuff. I'm including information not commonly found there, but more importantly, I'm also including my 55 years of training experience and study into this newsletter to steer you in the right direction, prevent you from wasting valuable earned money on junky supplements and all that. I don't hold anything back. So subscribe today. If you want the best friend you ever had, go to a local shelter, adopt a dog. They're fantastic animals, and what can I say? Well, let me put it this way. Uh, Dog is God spelled backwards, and I think I agree with that. Take care.